Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Handouts for everyone.
Thank you.
I wish you had pictures to go with this, except my camera had crapped out.
Here's a couple. Hello. Thank you all for coming in the last of the talks here. I thought I'd have maybe 3 guys here. Not only do I have guys, I have a couple ladies too. Just welcome. Take 2. Just in case you lose one.
Yeah, you did, thank you.
And I wasn't full
Yeah, I know. I didn't expect quite this many people this late in the show. Hello. How you doing? There's more handouts if anyone wants to take an extra. Okay. This is, if you hadn't guessed, since you already know where you are, Scott Mays presenting some of my bashes. I've been doing this since I was a kid. I really enjoy changing things. I really enjoy taking whatever came out of the kit box or whatever I was presented and changing it somehow. But I started off with some stuff that's not quite kit bash material, but it's still pretty interesting, and I thought I'd do this as a way of introducing myself because not too many people know me. So this is a Midland spinner from England that I built from a kit, added a lot of detail. One of the things that you have to do if you want to compete with the British is this. That's the British locomotives are mostly inside connected. So to do it right, you've got to have inside connection, and this one has a sprung driver. So if you look carefully, you can't see a gearbox anywhere. It's hidden up in there. And the springs on the driver actually work. They liked it over there, and that's not an easy task. The British are much better than we are at building stuff like that. So that's my sole brass locomotive that you'll see here. This is a Buyer Garrett that I basically scratch built or kit bashed using a couple Bachmann mechanisms, and the boiler is a piece of shower tube from Ace Hardware. And I brought one along in case anybody doesn't believe it. This one happens to be metal, but they have plastic, and they're just the right size. They're easy to work with, and they're cheap.
That looks like a down from a sink. You know,
Well, either the sink or the toilet.
well, yeah. Yes, sir.
But you just cut off the end and you've got a
Sure.
nice piece of straight boiler that's just about the
Amen.
right size. I did the same thing with this one. This is what's called a Kitson-Meyer. Now, I didn't bring the Buyer Garrett with me, but I did bring the Kitson-Meyer. It's over there on the table. If anyone here knows what a Kitson-Meyer is, I'd be surprised.
No.
But they built about 70 of them. The Meyer type was one of the types of locomotives that were exhibited in, I think it's 1848, in a big trial in Europe, where they pretty much settled on steam locomotive designs. But the Meyer never made it very far. Although there still are some running in Saxony on an air gauge there. But I've just fallen in love with it. The Kitson built about 70 locomotives, and I don't think any two were the same. So that's one of them. Then here's another. This is another kit bash that I've got over here. This is either Mrs. Duncan's tea kettle, or it's the Oregon Pony, or they're both the same locomotive. But if you go up to Cascade Locks on the Columbia River in Oregon, they have this locomotive. It's sitting up there in a glass building, and you can see into it, but I couldn't get anyone who would let me in. It's an old logging locomotive. I built it from a photograph, and then it was also on the front cover of the Narragansett Gazette one month. The only mistake I made in building this because I built it to ON 30. And later I found out the gauge is not 30 inches, it's more like 5 foot 5 inches or something like that. I'm not changing it.
No, no way.
So that's kind of by way of introduction. The main theme of this today is how to bash Bachmann. A couple of these are actually Bachmann, but I'm going to focus on stuff like the Mogul. This is the Bachmann Mogul with new domes, new stack, Bantha cap, tender from EDM, and no mechanical changes whatsoever. So part of my purpose today is to get people interested in doing something, and part of my way of doing that is to say, you can bash this without making any mechanical changes. You don't have to touch a wheel. It's a cosmetic kind of thing. And when you're done with the cosmetics, you've got a different locomotive than anyone else has. And the thing that I love about this the most is just that. You can create your own piece of rolling stock, your own locomotive, and it'll be different from everybody else's. It may not be as good looking, but it will be yours.
Amen.
And this one is another cosmetic bash of the Bachmann Heisler. I put an oil tank on it and a couple of little goodies that make it look kind of like the West Side Climax, not the West Side Heisler, but I kind of like it. The next version of the Bachmann Mogul is here. This is a 2A2 now. And what I did, you can see here, I forgot, I think I can, yeah, well, it doesn't help, does it? But what you see here is, once again, the Bachmann Mogul, but underneath it is one of the most easily available mechanisms you can find. The old PFM Santa Fe 280 mechanism. You can buy them on eBay, you can find them at club shows, you can find them all over the place. I'm having technical assistance. There we go. All right, there we go. Thank you, sir. And what you have to do when you start thinking about something like this is you've got your superstructure. You've got to take the mechanism that you want to use and line up the stack and the cylinders. There are almost no exceptions to the rule that the cylinders go right up the stack. So if you're going to kit bash something and have it be believable, you've got to have that. There are some exceptions, but not that I know of in this country. So what we do is we line that up, and then we go to the back of the thing and go, okay, what do I do to make the back ends line up? And what you do is this. In this case, the Santa Fe mechanism is too short. So you make a little piece. This is actually two pieces of brass bent into angles, soldered together and soldered to the back of the frame. And there's the new mount for the rear of the cab. And then you go, but I have a big hole here now. So what do I do about that? That's where the trailing truck goes. Oh. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. You can see there's room for a cow scale trailing truck there. Mm-hmm. Now I like the cow scales, but they're getting harder to find. Look, there you go. You can see it. Can't see it real well, but there's the trailing truck, and it fills in the hole perfectly. This happens to be another EDM tender. I don't think Paul's selling them anymore, but I don't really know. And I bet that if enough people ask him, he'd do another run. They're a nice etched brass tender, and they make the locomotive look different. But then that's true of any locomotive. The easiest way to kit bash any locomotive is just change the tender. The railroads did it all the time. Well, we hardly ever do that. And yet, if you were to put the Bachmann Mogul tender back there, it'd look fine. But this just changes it. You could put a whole bunch of different tenders back there. Wiseman sells different tenders. There's a lot of them. And here's the other part that I have a little bit out of order. Once you've got this part lined up, and really all you need to do with these steam pipes is bend the flanges around a little bit until it looks approximate. no one will be able to see in there to see that you're not exactly right. But as long as you've got that lined up so that it looks like the steam pipes are going up into the smoke box, then you can go back here, and when you make this thing, you need to make sure that it's level. Don't get out of level, just do it by eye. If it looks right, it is right. But that's kind of my main rule of any kind of kit bash. If it looks right, it is right. If it doesn't look right, it's going to be wrong. Okay? Everybody's going to point it out to you. And so if it doesn't look right, you better have some really good prototype that you can cite. This is just another view of the mechanism. I built a styrene firebox, which I really didn't need to do. All I really needed to do was just extend the firebox size a little bit. And this is it being an early locomotive. I built a big structure here that I really didn't need to build. So anyway, that is one of the easiest mechanical kit bashes you can do. I mean, you're past the cosmetic stage now, and you're matching one mechanism with another boiler. I'm sticking with the mogul boiler here, just because everyone's got a mogul and they don't know what to do with it. You're tired of looking at the mogul, but you don't know where to go from there. The next one is another mogul. This I found a gem, Pennsylvania Railroad 280 mechanism that fit right underneath the gem. Put a can motor on it. And the nice thing about this one is it fits almost perfectly. All I had to do was cut the back of the frame just a little bit. I cut that off, and then I added a little tab there, and that's where the boiler sits. The only other thing I had to do on this one was fill in under the boiler a little bit, extend the firebox sides down a little bit. I had to bury a nut in there so that it would hold up to the steam cylinders. But there you are. There's the frame, the steam cylinders. Same screw that it came with. And we got a 280. Now anyone can do those. Those are if you can model, you can do those. No one's picked up a soldering iron yet. The biggest change is this little cut at the end here, or the well, I'm sorry, I did pick up a soldering iron for the 282. You could epoxy it if you wanted. So there's the short end. Here's the long end. If you look at the mogul, you realize that the boiler's straight. A straight boiler locomotive is much easier to kit bash than something like the Tweetsy 460. Because when you start moving stuff there, you get into all the slopes and curves of the boiler. So what I did here was I took the cap off, filed out around the firebox opening until I could slide the cap back and forth on the boiler. And then I slid it as far back as I could get it, or as far back as I needed to get it for this mechanism. And then I was left with a slot there that Bachman had cast in. So I took a piece of styrene strip, glued it over, painted it, and it's another boiler pan. The hard part on this one was filling in the holes where the domes were, because I also had to move the domes. Now, I could have put 3 domes on there, but I just moved the 2. And it ends up being a little low wheeled. Those wheels should really be bigger. But it comes off, and it works. So there it is coming, there it is going. And that was relatively simple. Once again, you're taking a mechanism that runs and putting it under a different body. So the next step after that is a little more difficult. I didn't realize it when I got into it, but it's a lot harder than the first ones. This is a 460. That is the Bachman mogul with the whole drive unit moved back this way to make room for a 4-wheel pilot truck. And there you have the pilot truck. Here you have what I had to do. Oh, and by the way, this is all on the Facebook page for Kitbash Brothers, and it's described somewhat in the handout I gave you. But basically, I had to file the front of the frame away so that I could come up with a new surface for the. Here's a better picture of it. I used a piece of brass to extend the frame out the front and folded it right onto the existing frame. Here's the new versus the stock. And then having done that, I had to add a little spacer here because I'm moving everything back that far. This whole mechanism remains the same. I didn't change the mechanism, I just changed its position from up close to the cylinders to back further so that we had room for the pilot truck. And then when I got to the back end, I had to saw half the weight off and hold it down with the frame. But, and I can't tell you I had lots of plans. You just kind of cut and fit and go from what looks right and try and make it fit right. Here's the boiler band I was talking about before painting. I had to extend the running boards a little bit, not hard to do. And so with something, you can start with, I gotta go back to it. You can start with the mogul and you can lengthen it. And on this one, the cab is also moved back somewhat. So I mean, with a nice straight boiler like that, and the other Bachmann locomotive that lends itself to this is the consolidation because it also has a straight boiler. But there's a difference. The consolidation is a little more expensive and it's solid metal. This styrene is so much easier to work with that if you want to do something, especially if you're starting and you're going, yeah, this guy's crazy, but I'll see if I can do it. Start with a mogul because it's plastic. It's so much easier to work with. And if it doesn't work out, what have you ruined? The mogul? Start with one that's a Christmas engine if you're worried about it. But you don't want to ruin a consolidation first. They're too nice.
You can always change it into something else too that might work.
What?
Don't throw your thing away that it didn't cooperate what you wanted there. Change it again.
Yeah.
That's what's so easy. Yeah.
So the next thing I tried is even weirder and more difficult than the 460. I would not recommend you build this locomotive.
Oh my God.
But when I started it, it seemed real simple. I wanted a 440. Bachmann wasn't offering one at the time. This thing's a decade old now. Bachmann wasn't offering one, and when they did, it was a dwarf. It was either a dwarf or it was some Central American product.
Brazilian.
I really didn't like that much. That engine looks like it's got too much baggage hanging out the back. Anyway, this is the mogul, but now it's a 440. This is much more difficult. Here's a better shot of it. It looks right. The drivers look right, but to get them to look right, I had to slice off the back of the mogul frame because the spacing on the two front drivers is what I was after, not the two rear drivers. I mean, if you go back up here and look at the 460, if you try and build a 440 with that driver spacing,
sure. Yeah.
It's not going to look right. What you need is this driver spacing. And I'm going, oh, okay, I'll just slice off the back of the frame. Well, when you slice off the back of the frame, you have to add to the front of the frame. Yeah. I wasn't thinking about that. But, see if I can, yeah, there we go.
Oh boy.
That's what I ended up doing. I've got the frames cut off in the back. I had to extend it out this way. To extend it properly, I had to build a piece here that fits the cylinders the way the stock frame fit it. I ended up having to remotor it. And when I remotored it, the gearbox was flopping back and forth, so I had to put this brace in to keep it in place. It got quite complicated. Pilot truck, yeah, I had to build a pilot truck because the wheelbase on anything I had didn't work. I had to build a new bottom for the frame. So it was fun. I'm glad I did it. I like it better than Bachmann's, but I wouldn't recommend it.
A lot of work there.
A lot of work, exactly. Here's the let me see if I can do this right. There we go. There's another shot. You have to be dedicated on this one, especially now because You know, I even drafted an article for the Gazette. I was gonna, you know, publish and everything. And by the time I was done, Bachman had not just offered one 440, they offered two.
Well,
And I
so-
said, nobody's ever gonna be stupid enough to follow my footsteps.
Oh, boy.
And that, actually, that's not the worst. The worst is here. Here's the wiring. I had to slice away at the frame. Let me see. I had to slice away at the frame here and here to get all the wiring in there, and then I had to do, basically, these are tubes that run the electricity down to the bottom plate. And it was just more trouble than it was worth. You see the holes there,
Yeah.
and you see these pins. The holes are insulated. The pins are basically the electrical connection between the drive wheels and the motor. And there was no other place to put the wires. And there's the tenders, no big deal there. So then you go from that to something that looks huge, but it's really simple. This is the Tweetsy, the 460 boiler, and it's tendered, sitting on an Oriental Limited Mikado mechanism. It fits right on top. It bolts right up. You hardly have to do anything. Once again, you got this lined up. You go to the back end of the locomotive, and there's hardly anything to do there. Here's another version, same kind of deal. This is the 280 boiler, but I put it on a little, this is a Santa Fe, if I remember correctly, a Santa Fe mechanism. It's in it right up there. And once again, you line this up. That end takes care of itself on this one. Now, who ran what 30-inch gauge railroad ran a Pacific? I don't know.
Yours
But
does.
it looks nice.
Yours does.
Yeah, mine does, right. And here's another
really?
version of an articulated. This is not a mogul. This is the PFM, a Sierra mechanism with a consolidation boiler on top. That comes out looking real good.
Sure
But you don't really, I found I didn't really know how things were gonna look until I just lined them up visually. You know, I don't do any drawings, I don't really do any measurements. I just kind of line them up visually, and if it looks right, we keep going. If it doesn't, you trade it out for something else. There's another version of the same locomotive.
Well, now, there's the case where the stack doesn't line straight with the. So
Yeah, but it's an articulated.
I know.
Yeah.
Just- You mentioned that earlier, that some of them don't.
Right.
So there's a version.
Well, there are even rigid frame locomotives
yeah.
where the stack doesn't line up with the cylinders. But I don't know of any in this
Boy,
country.
that's beautiful. That's just beautiful.
If you go to Great Britain, the Great Western Railway does that. This is the first of, I've done several of these articulated conversions. This was my first, and it's by far the ugliest.
That's what I go for.
Well, it's I should say homeliest then. The reason I say that is,
Okay.
you see this here, it just doesn't look right. I don't like this. I used the original base for the cab and took a 40 cap and made it fit there. And then I just made these tanks. But basically, this is the 280.
They should line up.
Excuse me?
Should line up to the bottom of the cab, is that?
I think so. But the prototype that Bachmann used for their model doesn't. The prototype that Bachmann used for their model has running boards here and then a big drop down to the cab. And I think it's because those prototypes were built for sugar hulling railways where it's all temporary track. So you've got to keep your weight as low as possible.
Okay.
Because they're going to tear, you know, they don't have any real road bed. So I think the whole point was to keep the thing as low as possible. Anyway, it just doesn't look right if you're trying to model ON30 in some sort of non-sugar cane application. But I tried, and
Classified as ugly nothing.
yeah. Now here's a Forney.
Yeah, there you go.
This is pretty much a standard kit bash. You just lop the back of the Forney off, and I put a trailing truck on the back there. 'cause it looked better to me that way. Here's another Forney. This is my Roadster model. And this is kind of raised with the slope tanks and all that, and I just made this out of a piece of Kleenex, I think it was. A paper towel, and they just
For the tarp.
yeah, for the tarp. But these guys are styrene, the tank styrene, and then this is all stock mechanical, except for these guys, which came off an articulated, I think. The pilot truck of an articulated works quite well there. And I found that if you've got enough inventory, you just start going through your inventory to see what works.
Yeah.
Here's something that's in process. I found a 262 mechanism, and once again, we're back to the mogul. Actually, this one is a mogul boiler, and that cab is from a 280. You can see the little heat down there. So I'm not done with it, but I think it'll come out pretty well. Pardon me?
Move the body back.
You could. Might be. But the front line's up right now. So, and it doesn't hang over too much, but it's not hard to do. I mean, you just take the trailing truck, lengthen a little bit right at where it mounts, and you've moved it back. And that's the thing, you can make those adjustments once you've got a fairly good match. It's easy to move the wheelbase around a little bit, unless you start sawing off the frame like I did, and then it's a little bit.
You have to add back to it or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is how I lengthened the end of the locomotive. You can see it there, kind of. Anyway, all you have to do to lengthen the thing is just add these pieces here.
Yeah.
Just continue the same shape that was there. You're working with styrene, it's easy to do. Make yourself a new end plate. And there you go. This is not exactly a Kitbash, but I just thought you'd enjoy seeing
That's
it.
a little cutie.
These locomotives were
Yeah,
built
yeah.
in England for decades. They also built steam-powered trucks in England for decades that were really popular trucks. The only thing I did to make this, to Americanize this, was put a bell on it. Everything else is pretty much.
Question, this.
Pardon me? That's a
Is it
Sentinel.
Well, what I'm trying to say is it diesel power or is it?
It's steam
power?
powered.
That's an awful short stack. Don't
Well,
you think? I mean,
The
I'm
boiler's back here,
just- Yeah,
not here.
okay.
Actually, it's a vertical boiler back here.
Oh, there's the stack, okay.
Yeah, here's the
All
stack right here,
Sorry,
coming
I
up
didn't
through the
see
roof.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not as it seems.
Well, that's what threw me.
And it's gear drive,
Oh
or
my
chain
God.
drive, because you've got a cylinder
That is so.
driving the front axle, and if I had a picture of the other side, you'd see another cover like this going to the rear axle.
Oh, okay.
They're weird locomotives, but they worked, and they made them for decades. Look up Sentinel, just Google it, and you'll find a lot about it.
See pictures too and everything?
Yeah.
Great. I wish my camera wouldn't have crapped out.
This is another Bachman Kitbash. And this,
Boy.
I got to take you back. I've been building this stuff since I was a kid. One of the first things I tried to build was this locomotive in HO scale.
Yeah.
And some of you guys may be old enough to remember George Stock, but I sent away, he sold me a frame for my HO locomotive that I still have, and I never finished because I completely failed. I just couldn't get it to do anything. So years later, I decided I'd try again, and I built it in HO, and it came out really nicely. But I wanted one in 0-30, so I did this one. And unlike the HO one that I built originally, which was all brass, this is all styrene. And here, right here, is the power truck from the gas mechanic.
Oh my God.
And there it is
Oh
naked.
my God. Now, rivet detail, did you use that?
That's decals.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, that's decals.
Because I'm gonna be doing something like that too.
But here's the power truck. This is all decals. This is I think I made this one out of nickel silver because I haven't had it now. But the cooling coil is probably the most difficult part.
Yeah.
And I found when I did this, the easy way to do it, this sounds ridiculous, the easy way to do it is to do this half and this half completely separately and then solder them down the middle. I tried wrapping brass around, it wouldn't work. I couldn't get it to do anything.
Did you make a jig to keep the things equally apart when you soldered
Yeah.
to the verticals?
Yeah.
Did you try soldering flat and bending the through?
No, I didn't try that.
You solder them all flat and bend them up.
That could have worked, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do these things. I started out trying to wrap it around a
Kind
piece
of
of
learned by
wood.
doing.
Because I learned about this locomotive from an article in Railroad Model Craftsman from decades ago. And the guy was telling you, yeah, just wrap it around a piece of wood. Well, it didn't work for me. So I never thought about soldering it flat and then bending it.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Back here?
Yeah.
Let me show you. First of all, there's the power truck. The thing I did with this that I hadn't tried before is this power truck pivots so that this end goes up and down, this end goes up and down, and it pivots in the middle.
Oh.
So what you have there from a suspension point of view is you have two legs of a three-legged stool. Okay? It'll stay on the track this way. Then you go to the back. There's a shot of the interior. And you can see, here's what the power truck's pivoting on. Then you go to the back. The idler truck pivots from side to side, this way, instead of this way. So this forms the third leg of the three-legged stool. And if you don't know what this three-legged stool suspension is, you can actually Google it and they'll tell you. You cannot put a three-legged stool anywhere without all three legs touching. You put a fourth leg on and one of those legs is not going to touch sometimes. So this is essentially a three-legged stool. This one rocks this way, those rock that way. And to make sure it rocked well, this is a ball bearing. I bought a bunch of them at an NMRA auction. If I live to be 150, I'll never use them up. But the interesting thing about this is if you can also Google the term flexi chassis. This is a British term. They do a lot of very sophisticated suspension stuff there. And one of the basic principles is that flexi chassis, three-legged stool approach. And we're so used to sprung mechanisms that we think that's the be-all and end-all. But actually, this is a better idea. As long as you can establish three solid points, you're in good shape.
Oh,
Then this is just a little gas mechanical with a backwards miniatures top on it. Here's another gas mechanical with another backwards miniatures variation. Okay, and now I'm leading into the diesel part. For everyone who's interested in diesels, my basic approach to diesels is I take gas mechanical shells and I line them up until they're long enough to fit whatever I want to fit them on. This one, for example, here's the gas mechanical. Here's the gas mechanical hood and the first two doors on a gas mechanical shell. I cut it right there, and I took another shell and added it on. And when I was done, I had a superstructure that was just about the right length for an HO 45-ton chassis.
Oh, okay.
Now, where you have to cheat, every once in a while you have to cheat, and so if you look at this model, and it's sitting up there, if you look at this model, you'll find that only the thin man could get through there. But, your eye doesn't notice that when you're looking at a model. The other thing I had to do to make this work is this. I took the 45-ton chassis and added C-channel on both sides to widen the chassis to fit that gas mechanical cab. Now, if I'd been using some other cab, I'd have probably widened it a little bit more or a little bit less. But the gas mechanical cab, I like. And so that's all that is. The steps are from a Backwoods Miniatures kit, and they're brass. I soldered them to the brass channel, and away we go. The ends are, I've forgotten where the ends came from. But I do remember I had to short them because they were hitting stuff. So there's one version. Then you say, well, I like that, but it's not long enough. So we take the gas mechanical, first 2 doors, we add 2 more doors, and then we add another door.
Oh my God.
And since we've had to slice this one in half, we take that and we put it on the front end. And that fits a 70-ton chassis. That's just the right length. Even the thin man can get through this one. That's just the right length to fit on a 70-ton chassis. And once again, you got to widen it. You can use the C channel again. I just epoxy them to the original frames. And then, of course, you got lots of seams. So what I do is I get that styrene safety tread stuff, and I use HO scale, and it's still too big in terms of the safety treads. But at least it covers over all the sins that I've committed, gluing all that stuff together. Oh, and these little guys are Wiseman log bunks that I built sides and ends for. You can see them down on our layout. Well, you could have, but I guess it'll be gone when we're done here. And there's another shot of that same locomotive. These obscene-looking headlights, if you're an SB fan, you say, okay, he's done the ash cans. He's kind of overdone them, but they look like ash cans to me. And some of the stuff, I just made this. It's kind of a muffler for air intake, basically. But I found that the more detail you add, like this stuff, the less your eye looks at any particular detail and says, that doesn't look right. You know, you've got tools laying around and stuff all over the place. It adds to the visual attraction, even though it may not be technically perfect. It'll look right. This is one of the first ones I did, and I wouldn't advise this one either. Because while it looks simple, you're taking a pair of gas mechanicals again. What happens is, to get those gas mechanicals to work, you got to build a brass frame for it. Then you have to cut up the gas mechanical mechanisms, because what I did was I turned the 2 mechanisms into a pair of separate trucks. And it seemed like a good idea at the time, but it was fairly complicated. Here's the cab before it goes together. So that's simple. That's not hard. That's just all siding. But when you get into this, I don't know if I can make it any bigger. Yeah, there we go. When you get into this, the one motor's not there. I don't have it in there. It's a dual motor, and so you can get it to run, but then I put DCC in it, and that makes it more complicated. And so it's not something I would duplicate. Here's a much simpler thing. This is an old BBM, Boulder Valley Miniatures Kitbash. And what I did was, here's the stock cab width, but I didn't like it. It looked wrong to me. So I narrowed the cab. And then I added a bunch of like fire hoses, and this is firefighting stuff. Just added a lot of stuff. But it's basically a 44-ton mechanism with no mechanical changes. So once again, I mean, you can do a lot with cosmetics. And people go, wow, how did you build that? Well, all it is a stock 44-ton locomotive. But you've added a lot of detail. And you made it something different. Now I'm into a new era. I covered steam for you, I covered diesel. This is what I call the new era. This is 3D printing. Oh boy. So what we have here is a 2442 mechanism, a consolidation boiler, and my friend Calvin Witt is here. He's the guy who knows 3D. So we designed a cab and he printed it in 3D. And if you remember that Forney cab that sagged all the way down to here. I figured out that if I designed a set of air tanks, I could cover the fact that I wasn't changing the original mechanism. I was just putting this in so that I have a line here that continues the running boards with the cab line. So that's all 3D print. This is all 3D print. There are a couple internal parts you can't see here that are 3D prints that allow you to take the 280 boiler and put it right on the articulated mechanism. The only thing you have to do is somehow either add lots of weight back here or support part of the boiler weight up here, because the way it sits, it'll sag onto the front, and you'll have like one pair of drivers really doing all the work back here. But it looks so much better. I mean, my biggest problem with Bachmann articulateds is the boilers are so puny. It's just, you look at it and you go, there's no steam capacity there. It just looks tiny. So that's what got us started on that. What Calvin and I did was we put together what we call bashes that we've sold, I don't know, a couple dozen of them, to people who wanted to replicate this. There's a 2662 version of the same bash. Once again, you can see what look like air tanks that are really covering up the fact that the original mechanism sits all the way down here. And it just makes it look so much better. And we've got a consolidation boiler, so there's a lot more heft there. This tender I just happen to have in the scrapbooks. It's one of these projects that you start and never finish. You know? So I just hung it on the back just to see what it looked like. And then we go from that to tank versions. So here's the 2442. We've got the same basic approach back here. And this is something we're going to market because it's really pretty simple. There's no mechanical changes at all. You just hang this on the back. You put a couple tanks on there, and we printed up these tanks. This locomotive is up front for you to look at. We printed up these tanks. We printed up this part, and wham, you got a tank locomotive. Then I'm going to get you to the last diesel. I picked up a book one day about Hawaiian railways. This photograph is in there. I fell in love with that little locomotive. There's something about it that just captivated me, and I think what it was is you can see through the whole locomotive. Yeah. And then when you stop looking through it, you realize it's got arch bar trucks on it. And then you look behind the arch bar trucks, and they're spoked wheels. A diesel with arch bar trucks and spoked wheels, how can that get better? Well, it's got Talgo couplers. It was designed for sugarcane plantations too. But imagine an ON30, and on top of that, the gauge on this is 30 inches. This is on Kauai, one of the Hawaiian Islands. Everything on that island except for one short part is 30-inch gauge, or was in the heyday. So here we have a prototype that's 30 inches. We have all these odd combinations. And I said, I gotta build that. So there's what I built. I got that sitting up there too. The color's a little bit yellow or a little bit bright, but it turns out that's what they painted the prototypes. They were all yellow. And of course it is Hawaii, so, you know. And I did the model, as you can tell, as see-through as I could, no doors, no hood sides. I've only found 3 photos of the locomotive, and I've never seen one with any hood sides, so I don't know if they even came with them. But you can see the motors inside. Hidden down here is the Bachmann mechanism. This is sitting on a Bachmann 70-ton mechanism. No mechanical changes to the Bachmann other than I re-wheeled it. And you got little radiators sitting out front here. You can see through it all the way through. And this model is actually, I don't know how to solder to do this one, because it's all 10 thou nickel silver. There it is naked. Now it looks like I've had to do an awful lot of work to clean that up. But the fact is, That's with no cleaning at all on the super truck. I designed it so that all the seams are on the inside and use sweat solder everything. I have not filed or brushed any of that. It's ready for paint, well, ready for, you gotta do a little cleaning, but basically it's ready for paint. And there's the same one sitting on it.
Scott, what do you use for cleaning, like acetone or what do you clean?
Whatever I come up with. Whatever's the flavor of the day.
Okay.
409.
Give it in the gas tank. Whatever.
This one has, here's Calvin's work again. You see the pilot beams that swivel, that are mounted on the arch bar trucks. So that whole thing swivels together. And then Calvin did the motors, the 3D printed motors. And this one doesn't have his headlights, but I made some brass headlights. And then the more we looked at the prototype, the more we realized how tiny their headlights are. See those things? It's like they took them off a truck or something.
Well, they didn't work at night.
Pardon me?
They didn't work at night.
That's true, they didn't.
Does it have sound?
No, but it has DCC
Oh, my God.
because it's a stock later version Bachmann mechanism in there. Yeah. You could add sound. I think you'd probably want to stick it up in the roof or something. And then this is the most recent in the works. This is the Bachmann logo again, recurrent theme. And as we were, what happened was we did those articulators, and we said, well, we'll have to do tank versions of the articulators. Well, they're kind of in progress. One of them's up there. But in the meanwhile, I said, wait a minute, we can do a tank version of the Mogul. And that's what this is. It's pure stock Mogul with tanks and a different cab and a different end beam. And all we did here was this trailing truck came off and articulated, and the wheels are from Bachmann Europe. They're sloped wheels. So that's something that we're going to get out for people to buy within a month or so. We have to figure out exactly. We've got these done, but we have to figure out exactly whether we want to try doing them ourselves or have somebody commercially do it. Not Shapeways, but somebody like that. So I think, yeah, there's another version of the same one. Oop, I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that. Where did I go? Where'd I go? Now I'm lost and I can't read it. What? Oh, there, it's up there. No, it's not. Oh, well. Nothing like ending in a flurry here. What happened? What? There we go. There's a whole raft. I've got photo after photo after photo of the Huey locomotive. I even did a kind of a critter version. And I'll go back to the original presentation for you here. There we go. So that's basically the presentation. I think Calvin wants to say a few words about the 3D printing part. Because the new wave, I think the new wave in modeling. Oh, thanks very much. I think the new wave in modeling, in this country anyway, is going to be 3D printing. I'd like to see people get more excited about soldering, because I modeled British prototypes and was building British models for a decade or so. Soldering is fun, especially with nickel silver. It's not like brass at all. The heat doesn't travel. I've soldered parts of that by holding it in my hands and soldering.
Oh my gosh.
And it sounds ridiculous, but you need to try nickel silver. It's a different world than brass. And it makes it a lot of fun. And as I say, this thing, I hadn't touched that with any kind of, and tried to clean up anything.
Now, you're talking nickel silver.
Excuse me?
I say you're talking the nickel silver.
Yep.
Where do you get that type of sheet? You know, brass, you pretty rare to get in the hobby shop.
Yep.
But where do you find the nickel silver sheet?
Eileen's Emporium,
Where's that?
England.
Oh my God.
Yep. And I mean, they're
Import,
great
huh?
people. You can
Import,
get all
huh?
kinds of stuff there. But fortunately for us, we didn't have to go that far.
Okay.
On the Amazon, 6x6 sheet for
They got it on Amazon now? Good.
28 gauge.
Oop, I'm sorry. I'm doing it the wrong place here. What's that? You get into soldering and it's a little bit different world. What I use for that mostly was 145, which is something else that's available in English. I mean, and other people have it. RS has it. And 145 means it melts at 145 degrees. It's easy. It's much easier for lead than lead solder. They change the proportions of tin and lead, and they get different melting points. And the British are really good at this. They have, for example, they have 70-degree solder for white metal castings, because they'll solder stuff to white metal castings. Then you go from 70 to 145, from 145 to 188, and from 188 to 2 something or other. And there's like 4 different levels of temperature, which means you can start out by soldering some stuff with the highest temperature solder. Then you work your way down as you add things to that assembly, and you never have anything fall off. It's a whole different world. What's that?
If you go on Amazon and other websites, you can find various temperature grades of solder.
Amazon has it now?
Amazon has it. They've had it for a
all
long
right.
time. You just need to do some research to check the temperature ranges that it melts in. But there are various ranges, or there's check with jewelry supply companies as well. They might have
Yeah.
that as well, like Auto Fred.
Auto Fry.
In
Try Auto, FREI in Oakland. They have a nice website. I think you're right. But you need to find out what temperature the solder melts at. Because, I mean, you can build some very sophisticated pieces by using the different solder temperatures. The problem is that if you're new at it and you stay someplace too long at one of the last pieces, you're going to have other things start to fall off. I've been there myself. So I've got most of the models, or I've got the models that you saw, most of them are sitting up here. And I've got, I think, time for Calvin and time for some questions and answers. If anybody else has got some questions or whatever.
So I'm going to jump in here really quick. Let me try and find it with Huey. Figure all this not my native domain, despite what people might think.
For you talking, I'll change the photographs for you.
Okay, that works. So initially, actually, when I met Scott, it was actually for the Huey project, and the thing was, I had posted up on the OM30 Facebook group. I was very cautious about it at first, like, I do 3D printing with model trains, thinking everybody's going to chase after me with digital pitchforks and tie me to a stake, and you'd be all like, oh, new technology, we don't do that. No, everybody actually received it very well, but I'd seen other people in other places do it, but I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. Then Scott comes along and sees that and sends me a message going, hey, I'm working on this project and I need some engines made for it. I've made a styrene prototype. Is it possible for you to come over to my house and show you it? And then we kind of just work from there. So numerous revisions of the engines later, based off those original styrene prototypes, we were able to make the ones that you see in there. But the beauty of it was Scott's really good at scratch building things. He understands how 3D printing works and things like that, but he doesn't understand how to do it. So what he was able to do was make up the various components necessary, and then me and another friend of his, Richard, were able to come along and do the necessary artwork for. Richard did the artwork for
The etch.
the etch.
The etch wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Richard Brennan.
And then I came along and did the front trucks. Scott had just come up with a very, very crude prototype, and then I came along and added the detail items like the molded in brackets and the braces around the coupler, and even designed it so it had the necessary components, so you just dropped a piece of styrene on top with a screw, your coupler was all done. So it definitely is something where if you don't understand how to do it, you can find somebody who is capable of doing the designing for you. The beauty of it is you can make, it's not as efficient for making a couple of an item, you might be better off resin casting it, but if you're planning on making multiples of them, or it's something that's very complex that can't easily be duplicated using existing means, it definitely is a viable option. The biggest issue that I found though is just the thickness limitations of a 3D print versus say a resin print. The 3D print is multiple layers stacked on top of each other. It doesn't have the same strength as a single piece resin casting, but depending upon what you're doing, it can definitely be useful. But over there I have two models that I can show that were done by another friend, Foley, Locomotive. Yeah, Fran Foley, he was downstairs selling. Don't know if he's still there or not. Probably will pack up by the time we're done. But he's done some interesting things where he lays the pieces out flat and then either assembles them himself or you do it for him. But still with 3D printing, you can put in all the details, window details, things like that, and then kind of assemble it like an IKEA kit. But it's definitely something that's probably the biggest entry difficulty is either designing it or understanding how to use a printer. But now that there's a lot more people in the community who know how to use one or know how to do design work, it's definitely bringing it down. What was that?
So you gotta learn how to program.
Exactly, come up with the models, everything like that, but it's something that's, as more people get into it, it's easier and easier to find people who are willing to work with you to do the necessary work to get things done. So,
Yeah, I'll look
yeah.
at a question.
Yes, Ted?
Is there like a book like 3D printing for dummies?
There probably is.
Is there?
Probably, I can't say that I've seen it, but if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of stuff. I'm
Okay.
slowly trying to work on, after a suggestion from a friend in a class who's starting to learn one of the 3D design programs for
Right.
class. She's going, well, you know how to use this really well. Why don't you do some videos about very basic stuff? So I'm thinking of gearing them more towards model trains,
Right.
showing like, here's a couple ways that you can design a 55-gallon oil drum, but it shows you various tools that you can use to create the same thing. So you can very quickly learn how to create a bell, how to create a whistle, how to create a smokestack. And then with those, just a lot of it, I don't have, my laptop is downstairs, but a lot of it is just very simple drawing that you just manipulate. You either cut things out or add things to it, or you just draw a hexagonal shape. You pull that out, you draw a circle on top of that, and you pull it out. You've just created a bolt washer.
Right.
It's very simple to create that sort of stuff. It looks complex, but once you know the basics, it's kind of like cooking. Once you know how to boil water, you put pasta in there, and you add some salt, then you make the sauce, put tomatoes in there. You kind of just add on to it with time. You just learn what works.
Right.
So that's kind of the best way to put it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just Googled it, 3D for dummies is at Amazon.
Oh, thanks, Josh. I had a feeling somebody would come out with something.
They got everything.
Oh, yeah.
And if anybody's interested in the Huey 14, we have a couple envelope kits here.
How much?
$195.
Well worth it.
It's definitely.
I was noticing that we don't have, well, I didn't see the picture instructions.
They're not. They're on the web.
Well,
You
for
can
those-
have color that way. I mean,
Yeah.
Early on I said, I'm
What
not,
throws me, my
I'm not
computer
mailing
doesn't
people
work
lots of
though.
paper.
Yeah,
But you can have
okay.
color that way, and you can change the instructions as people say, well, you didn't get that quite right. You can make that change to the instructions and everybody gets it.
Okay. Great. No.
And the other part is,
No,
we're
that
not
looks like
charging anybody for shipping these things out, but when we weigh them, if we added written instructions, it would double the weight. Isn't that silly?
Do you take Visa?
Yeah, no, do I take these? How about PayPal?
No.
How about a promise?
How about a check?
That works.
Okay. I'm thinking, I'm seriously thinking, so.
Okay.
It's definitely a very unique
It's-
model when it's done. I'll say that much. It's a head turner.
Thank you all for coming. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, good. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
I was looking for you guys earlier.
Really?
Did your friend show up?
Yeah. 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 So he